to the very first episode of the Beefy Pod, brought to you by Beefy Finance, the multi-chain yield optimizer located on more than 20 chains, ready to provide you the best yield in all of DeFi. My name is Jorge, and I'm the host of this lovely podcast, and I'm here with Wesso, our lead developer, brainiac, genius programmer, who has the patience of 1,000 suns. And I'm here with Darren, the general manager of Rocket Pool. If you're not familiar with Rocket Pool, it allows you to liquid stake your Ethereum so you can use it on multiple applications throughout the chain while earning a yield on your ETH. Rocket Pool has been around since 2017. I think I got that right.
Yeah, well, 2016.
All right.
Yeah,
2016.
close enough.
Right.
Yeah, that's all good.
And is an OG in the space. Darren is here to educate us on Rocket Pool, talk about the fun and interesting things going on, and we are happy to have you here on this ride today. How are you doing, Darren?
I'm great. I'm perfect. Thank you for accommodating my time zone, because it's usually a bit funky to accommodate my time zone. But thank you.
No, we're happy to accommodate, and you just said you're perfect, so I'm happy to hear that. Perfection is a very, very tough place to reach, but excited that you've reached it. So for our audience at Beefy, we do have a few products that work with Rocket Pool, and we do have quite a few people in our community that interact with Rocket Pool. But I wanted to ask you if you could give us just a general overview of what Rocket Pool is, how it started, and where it's going.
Yeah, fantastic. So Rocket Pool, so it started in 2016. Ever since staking was a thing, since the Move paper, Vitalik put out the Move paper in 2016. We've been around. So our founder Dave actually built a prototype of Rocket Pool back in 2016-17, and so we've been around a very long time in the staking space. We actually launched on mainnet in end of 2021. There's a big gap there, obviously, but essentially our product wasn't able to be built until that point. The beacon chain wasn't actually mature enough at that point. So we were live in end of 2021, and it's gone very, very well since then. We're one of the largest liquid staking providers. We're staking about 3.5% of all of the staked ETH that's being staked today. We have, as you said, our liquid staking token RETH. But actually, so Rocket Pool allows you to choose your own adventure, essentially. On the liquid staking side, obviously the token itself has fantastic utility in DeFi, which I'm sure we'll talk about some more. But also Rocket Pool allow node staking as well. So anyone can be a node operator with Rocket Pool. You need currently 8 ETH to be a node operator with Rocket Pool, and you can essentially get some extra commission that way by on your ETH to node stake, essentially.
So that's uniquely different, right?
Yes.
Than any other liquid staking provider.
Yeah.
And you have to be dealing with two completely different demographics of users, right? Ones that just want to stake and obviously have the token and reap the benefits of either just being the liquid staking portion of it, or being able to participate in DeFi. Then you have the node operators. So how was it how challenging was it really sort of finding your place into basically catering to two completely different audiences, and how do you guys work through that?
Well, to be honest, we were kind of lucky at the time. Maybe we didn't necessarily feel lucky, but that long run up between 2016 and 2021 before we went live was actually extremely good for us, in the sense that we could develop a community. And so we spent that time kind of building product, getting feedback from the community, and really building up this massive community of people who are extremely passionate about Ethereum and extremely passionate about Ethereum staking. So it's a very active community. Yeah, they're definitely out there. So and the richness in that community is what kind of makes Rocket Pool really special. So that community they were early adopters, both on the liquid staking side and on the node staking side. And so that's kind of helped us. We've obviously brought along a lot more people since then, and kind of evolved certainly become more mature ourselves. So yeah, it's definitely been an interesting ride. It's very exciting for the future as well. I can kind of touch on that, but it's been an interesting ride so far.
Hey, that's awesome. And I think like what I appreciate about Ethereum the most is that level of security. And I feel as a community, Ethereum is probably the most engaging when it comes to governance and decentralization. And so actually one thing I noted as I was doing research was that there's a big emphasis in Rocket Pool about decentralization. Obviously the elephant in the room in this space is Lido with a little over 30, I don't know how much now, but over 30% of the total ETH stake.
They're like a mammoth. They're like a mammoth in the room. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they probably fill up the space. But I wanted to ask you, so how does Rocket Pool decentralize? And also one thing I kind of wanted to discuss after, I noticed that 8 Ethereum to start a node is considerably lower than creating a regular Ethereum node. I was hoping you could dive into that after.
Yeah, sure. So so we decided very early on that we wanted everyone to be able to participate in staking. That was kind of our mission, was to lower the barrier of entry for people to be in staking, whether that's on the liquid staking side where you can stake any amount and you don't need to run a node, to on the node operator side where we kind of lower the barrier of entry through software, making it super easy to run a node, but also lowering that bond from 32 to 8 ETH.
Why 8?
Okay, so there's a few reasons for that. So it was originally 16, and the reason why it was kind of 16 was to make sure that our ETH was like this super secure asset, because with staking, although it's very unlikely, you can actually lose more than you can lose. So general slashing, you'd only lose about 1 or 2 ETH, but there are these really unlikely edge cases where you can lose more than that, and you can actually lose down to like 16, at least 16. So that's why we settled on 16. Once we kind of like looked at it, that model was very, very conservative, and kind of hampered our growth. So we needed to kind of redress that slightly. But the down to 8 is perfectly fine. It covers all of the usual slashing. So I should say, so from the RE's perspective, they don't have to worry about slashing risk, or at least normal slashing risk. If a node operator is slashed, it comes out of their bond. So from an RE perspective, there's none of this kind of like socialized losses from that perspective. They are open to some of those unlikely scenarios, but with 8 ETH, it covers all of those unlikely scenarios to a very, very good degree anyway. So that's why we reduced it down to 8. We're looking at reducing it again at some point. There's a couple of things that we need to do to be able to kind of like do that. There's a couple of threats that we have to deal with within the protocol for us to be able to drop it further. But that's kind of like on the plan.
How much lower would it be? I mean, if you guys have an idea, I'd love to know.
So currently the plan, and it's slightly in flux because our next release is called Saturn, and it's probably a mega release. It's probably multiple releases rather than just one release. So the idea with Saturn is that we will actually reduce it to 4. So 4 still gives us really good coverage, but in actual fact, it would probably be something like 4 ETH for the first 2 mini pools, and then probably 1.5 for the kind of like preceding, so or the subsequent. So in that way, go.
I was going to as a question as part of this, has like scalability been sort of an issue? So like if you're just not having enough node operators in order to intake the amount of demand, probably for people who want to, I guess, mint our ETH. So has that part been like the reason why you guys are like at 3% compared to like, Lido's 30%, where they're not having to rely on sort of, node operators?
Yeah, I'll kind of rewind very slightly. So we're a decentralized protocol. So obviously all of our node operators are individual node operators.
Right.
Anyone can be a node operator. It's permissionless and all that sort of stuff. We made that choice, and because we felt that was the healthiest for Ethereum. Obviously Lido decided to go centralized first, and then, permissioned, I should say, permissioned first, and then kind of try to decentralize. We felt it was better to do it decentralized from the beginning, which is why we kind of like took a little bit longer to get to market, because it's actually a lot harder, funnily enough. So the idea there is, yes, being a decentralized protocol is much harder to scale because we're reliant on node operators spinning up validators, and the bond is probably the biggest aspect to that. There's actually two elements which we're sorting out in Saturn. So the first element is the ETH bond, which obviously we're lowering. The other one is currently you need an RPL bond as well, and you need like 10% 10% RPL stake as well. So that is also being kind of looked at or within SAT, so that we can have ETH only bonded mini pools and not just not RPL as well. So that's being kind of like looked at and researched. Some of this is actually to compete with Lido CSM. So Lido are releasing their community module like a year's time, and we have to be able to compete with that. So so that's kind of some of the reasoning behind. Well, we already kind of had those discussions to move towards these ETH only stuff and lowering the bond, but this kind of like puts a fire under us a little bit because we don't mind competing with the other decentralized protocols, but we have to seriously compete with Lido because we don't want them to get any more share than they already have.
Yeah, it is a adventure as you're trying to grow in the space. We try as a decentralized protocol to be as decentralized as we possibly can. It is very difficult to continue to be decentralized and scale.
Yes.
There's a lot of blockers. There's a lot of things that become very difficult. Especially for something like Beefy, where it's like on 25 different blockchains. There's a lot of things that like you can try to decentralize as many different pieces as you possibly can, but there's always like these certain points of centralization that you sort of have to work through as you continue to grow. And kudos to you guys for trying to maintain as decentralized as possible and doing it the right way. But it's a very tough decision to make from a management perspective, a scalability perspective of like, how do we continue to grow? How do we continue to compete? How do we not get left in the dust of these other protocols at the same time, staying true to, why we were in this, why we even started, so our ethos, like, it is, seeing all of the different protocols, there are definitely ones out there that'll like just sacrifice everything, be completely, centralized, because they want to get the market share. It's more important for them to, get the users. But at that point, it's like, well, you're not really, doing, I think, what you set out to do, or you're not really, it's hard to really compete with the decentralized protocols. And so to continue to grow and be decentralized and compete with other centralization, with other protocols is very difficult. We see it all the time, but yeah.
Speaking of that, I think this is oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say one kind of like flip to that. It's from a scaling perspective, it can be difficult, but there's so many advantages for being decentralized as well.
Yes.
The hard part is you have to do the hard work to develop a community first before community and activity around your product, even before you launch, which seems to be the other way around a lot of the at the moment. But there is a lot of advantages in terms of, our community are our word of mouth, and they're a word of mouth machine. So we hardly had to spend any money on marketing because of that. And they're passionate. They drive us forward. They're analysts. They're researchers. They're marketers. They're so many different things about Rocket Pool are handled by the community and not necessarily by the core team. So I generally say I'm the general manager of the core team because the core team of actually a very small part of Rocket Pool. So that's kind of like the exciting thing.
It is, though, interesting the environment that you're trying to start the protocol in, because if you were in last cycle's bull market when there was a lot more people that were open to contributing, being part of a DAO, being part of some decentralized community, as compared to when we were going through this lull during the bear market and trying to start up a protocol, and there's like, just crickets and like everywhere. It's very difficult to build community first, right, and really start with that decentralization right off the bat than it was back when there was a lot of activity, a lot of people that are crypto interested that are trying to get into Web3. Now that we're seeing sort of the market return, and people, the speculators are back. I think people are becoming more interested in crypto again. We'll see more community, start to develop, more people that are active. We've seen it more, more people active in our Discord or Telegram. Not that we've kept a very core contingent of, very passionate community members, just like you guys have. But, we've seen a return of people from the past. We've seen people that are, completely new to the space that are learning again. So this would be the time, I guess, in these like bull cycles is when you really have an opportunity to start a decentralized protocol, because it's very difficult to find community, people to latch on, people to stick with it as you're continuing to build, and you guys to do it with, no product, or like, you're just like, hey, this is a promise of a product, to come to fruition at some point is also very difficult.
And actually, I took a note here because I had a thought bubble in my mind. And speaking of decentralization, I think this is a really interesting moment for Ethereum, because as to whether an ETF is going to be approved or not, I don't have a crystal ball. But the detail that I found very fascinating was the S1 filed by Fidelity, which says that they want to include staking. And I think one of the biggest fears within staking cryptocurrency in general is like this idea that perhaps one giant institution could come in with tons of capital and potentially flood, the network, and then have tons of influence on the future or the prospects of the protocol in general. So I think I'd like your take on this. How do you feel about Tradfi coming in? And I think just being very, very blunt about wanting to stake Ethereum, how do you think Rocket Pool is going to play a role there?
Yeah, I mean, that's another reason why we are kind of, trying to innovate as much as possible to deal with this kind of like scaling that we've got, because we want to be able to take on. Essentially, we don't really want them going to Lido. We want to be. We want them to see us as a way in as well. In terms of like Tradfi coming in, I think it's kind of inevitable. But I think the way that we're kind of structuring Ethereum makes it a lot easier. So although there's going to be like a power law, there's going to be a lot of people with a lot of stake, or so a few people with a lot of stake. But what's really important for decentralization is that long tail. So it's being able for everyone to be able to participate. If everyone can participate, then it means that we have this really long tail of stakers who, for example, will make sure that the chain is censorship resistant, or credibly neutral, and this sort of thing. So that's kind of where it needs to be. The protocol itself is adapting as well. The protocol itself is kind of adjusting to things like inclusion lists and that sort of thing to be ready for that sort of thing. So I think it's probably inevitable, but at the same time, I don't think it's necessarily all bad. I think we'll end up with a situation where the long tail kind of holds everyone else accountable. I think that's kind of where it will probably end up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, my hope is if you guys from Fidelity are watching, Rocket Pool, great option. Just throwing it out there.
Actually, we've been having quite a lot of interest for institutional stuff on the node operator side rather than the liquid staking side. So we obviously have a massive demand for ETH as well, and eventually, things will kind of like sort itself out in terms of the regulatory ecosystem around liquid staking and all of that sort of thing. But we're definitely seeing kind of interest on the node operator side from large players, and that's kind of interesting as well. So yeah, we're definitely seeing on both sides.
I think that's like a super unique can of worms, because when I read the filing, at least for them, it just speaks on staking, but I haven't even begun to consider the possibility that they might open their own validator pools, like for their clients. Like that makes a ton of sense. Especially one thing I noted in when some of the podcasts I was listening to is the commission that a node operator on Rocket Pool makes. So your potential, you're earning more yield if you run a node on Rocket Pool than if you just do a standalone 32 32 Ethereum node. No,
Yeah.
am I right in that?
Yeah, that's right. That's correct. Yeah. So so what actually happens is, so you stake your 8 ETH, and you earn the yield on that 8 ETH. Whatever you earn, which I think is about 3.5%, 4% or something like that. But then you earn commission on the yield that you generate on behalf of the liquid stakers. So we take 8 ETH from you as a node operator, and we match you 24 ETH from liquid stakers, and you earn 14% commission on the yield that you earn on behalf of liquid stakers. So you earn considerably more as a node operator on Rocket Pool than you would kind of like as a solo staker, because of that kind of like liquid staker commission basis. Currently, you also earn RPL rewards as well, which can be considerable. I think at the moment that's about 8%. But with that, you need to obviously you need to have RPL. But that's so you definitely earn more with Rocket Pool, which is exciting. When we reduce the bond, though, actually that will probably go up as well. So you'll add the difference each time we reduce the bond. We are able to reduce the commission for liquid stakers, but also increase the amount that node operators get. It's kind of like a win-win scenario. And so that's actually been the case for the last time we did it, and so this time around will be the same. So you'll actually end up kind of earning a lot more, even more actually, than you would do currently.
Wow, that's a game changer right there. 4 ETH, and you can create a node. How many nodes are there currently? I think it was like 3,200 last time I checked.
Yeah, well, about 3,500. Yeah.
Wow.
And we're that's across about 190 different geographic locations. So we're all over. Our node operators are all over the world, which is interesting. But it means our Discord is busy.
I mean, that's great.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to collude with 3,500 nodes, different cultures and different languages. That's for sure.
Yes, yeah, and very, very different. Different language, different cultures. I mean, the community is quite strong, but there's probably a few thousand active members within the Discord and the community. There's really a few hundred that are really, really kind of like driven and actually drive the protocol. And then, but there's just kind of like a few thousand. I kind of call them dark matter, because we never really see them until they pop up in Discord once or twice a year, or they come up to us at a conference or something. But they're out there, and they participate in governance. But they don't necessarily speak up on Discord, but it's good. Like
those are my favorite.
Yeah, I know. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, like we go to a conference and we haven't, like, somebody's been following everything that we've been doing for 3 years, and has participated in governance, but just as an address, and we have never heard them or seen them, or but they exist, and they're there.
Yeah, that's
just those are great. I love those ones.
Because it can be quite intense. It can be quite intense in our Discord, because they're very passionate about Rocket Pool, so they're constantly driving us as like a tech team. But often, it's quite refreshing. It's quite refreshing when somebody comes up to you and says, "You're doing a great job." I was like, "Thank
you." Yeah. We all just need more of that.
A little bit of human contact goes a long way.
Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to touch on is we have Eigen Layer around the corner. We have different protocols building on Eigen Layer. I wanted to ask you, in this phase of Rocket Pool, or just liquid staking tokens in general, how is Rocket Pool adapting to the implementation of all these different risk staking protocols that are coming up, or applications?
Yeah. Actually, that's a good question. I might have a mildly controversial take, but so I would say there are two phases, two things about Eigen Layer, right? There is the future and there is the now, right? And the future is very interesting. Sharing Ethereum, the trust network across different decentralized networks, so you don't have to spin up, decentralized network each time, is very interesting. I don't. That part of it's interesting, right? So we're definitely, so from the community are very interested in Eigen Layer, and we've got a research grant that's out at the moment to research how we can kind of like integrate with Eigen Layer at an appropriate time. So that's probably the key thing there. So from the technical perspective, so that's fantastic for the future.
Can I ask you real quick? So for Eigen Layer, I think you essentially, in order to validate the AVSs, you have to run their own like software, right? Are you going to be able to do that and run a Rocket Pool node?
So yes, or in theory, yes, because we have this thing called the smart node stack. So and all it does is it's kind of like a wrapper around, spinning up an Ethereum node, and makes it super simple. We can actually kind of hook Eigen Layer into that, so that so that they're basically just add-ons. We have to kind of like see how we architect that though, whether it's going to be like a separate thing or whether it's going to be built into our smart node. This is all stuff that's being reviewed with that kind of like research effort. We've also got like kind of like the slashing as well. How that is going to work. That's probably the biggest thing, because obviously our ETH holders need to be made whole first before Eigen Layer. So there's going to be there's kind of like a thing there as well. But there's that research is kind of like ongoing, so we don't have an awful lot of details about that yet. Then there's kind of like, so that's the future, but then there's kind of like the now, and the now is that everyone's taking deposits for products that don't exist, and not only that,
but you get points.
But not only that, but they're issuing points, and then there's restaking of those points, and I don't. It's not that I don't get it. I get it. Just,
I mean, it's gotten a bit out of hand.
It's out of control, is what it is. Yeah.
But to be honest, it started a wave. So like this Eigen Layer point system of like, hey, like here's the idea in theory of what we're trying to do, and we have some contracts that obviously are going to have to be upgraded in order to actually accommodate what they're building. But hey, let's get it going. Let's start getting like the validators in and onboarded, and you could stake your ETH there. And we'll also take all these RLT, like these liquid staking tokens. So I haven't, like, are they even doing anything? Is it just staking to earn points? Are they actually doing anything with the liquid staking tokens?
Not that I'm aware of, because they would have to be delegated and to restake. Well, so the actual node operators, I don't think that's in place. So yeah, I don't quite get why they're taking deposits for that. Yeah, I mean, I do. Sorry, I do know, right? Because it's TVM.
I think the main, exactly. Well, I guess to build it up, marketing, right? And right now, you're just giving away points, which is really, I mean, they can make up however many points they want and give them away.
Right.
It's not like there's a finite amount of points that are allocated, I'm sure, or maybe they have one in their head, but essentially, like, they're able to build up marketing and demand for participating and obviously getting the brand out there. I feel like now, everybody sort of knows about Eigen Layer. And then in addition to that, now there's the LRTs, which are essentially just staking on your behalf and then giving you points on top of points. So, which is a whole nother. And then I think that there's actually another level of that. Right? I think that somebody else was building like an LRT aggregation or something like that, where there's ones that are already at a pot.
Yeah, there's restaking. There's
restaking the restakers.
Yeah, restaking,
right?
Restaker. Yeah.
I mean, how much yield do you get at that point when you stake and then restake? Then
is it yield? Because it's points. And how we like? I don't know what I mean, it's not really yield, right? It's just points.
Well, I guess if we're talking strictly financial gain, unless there's a way to calculate the fully diluted valuation of the Eigen Layer token, only then do we actually know what the yield is when you combine your staking, your liquid staking, along with the Eigen Layer token airdrop. So for all we know, if those points are actually valuable, then chances are you're getting well over. It could end up being 50%. I mean, I would imagine that if you're staking one ETH,
here's
the same exact amount in ETH terms. I mean, I'm not really sure.
What you're doing right now is the reason why it was a brilliant move on the marketing side, because it's you cannot really value what a point actually
Right.
is. But you can speculate what the value of that point is. And so what they've done is, instead of saying, I go to Rocket Pool and I get 2% rewards in RPL, right? Like, I know exactly how much I'm getting. And then I go to somewhere else and I get 3% rewards. I can compare those two. But if I'm saying, hey, I'm going to earn points here, I'm going to earn points there, now you're speculating on the possibility that maybe one protocol is more valuable than others, and maybe the 1 point system is actually going to give you more value from their points than the other one. So it created, like, essentially, instead of you having the real answer to whether or not you can compare two different protocols, now you have to sort of speculate and guess. And it's down to the marketing level of those protocols and whether or not you feel like there's the higher value prop with one over the other.
I mean, I think in the end, it's better for the protocol because they're going to get more activity, but it's worse for the customer because the customer's points are inevitably going to be more and more diluted as more and more points are distributed. Well,
I mean, that's the same thing, but you can't see that.
I mean, obviously,
right?
you
can see that
in
a yield rate. You can see that in, like, when you're converting it to actual tokens. When you're saying points, you just you don't really know all of the answers. You have, like, one variable out of something that you need multiple variables in order to make a real decision on. So I think that's part of the problem, until we actually know, like, what's, the market capitalization of, like, let's say Eigen Layer, and then how much are they actually distributing of that to this points airdrop, and then what are those points going to be valued at? You're just sort of speculating that, hey, it's going to be worth this much amount of money. And so if you go into Twitter, what do you see? People doing exactly that. They're doing, like, basically financial audits of what they believe that the points will possibly be, in the future once they're able to be, distributed for, a real token. And some of the protocols have never even said that they're ever doing a token.
So some of the protocols are just like, here's some points, no token. Wow. Listen, nothing here is financial advice. All right, I forgot to mention that in the beginning.
No, particularly.
I mean, how can it be? Points are not financial.
Oh my God! Just careful with your points.
What I don't get is this whole ecosystem being built on top of Eigen Layer's execution risk. So Eigen Layer have to execute because they've got $5 billion plus all this whole entire ecosystem that is built on Eigen Layer. So that's quite a lot of execution risk, or at least it's a big impact of their execution risk. So that's what I don't necessarily dig. The other thing that one of our community members mentioned as well is there's something like $5 billion or probably more now in Eigen Layer. How much? So let's assume that that's not mercenary capital, right? But it is. Let's assume that it's not. How much yield do the AVSs need to produce to give them an adequate yield? It's quite a lot.
Yeah.
So you need a lot of AVSs and some pretty big use cases for them to. And I don't say that we won't get there eventually. I'm just saying in the short, medium, even early, long term, that is unlikely. So yeah.
I mean, I assume
I think it's just gotten a bit out of control.
I mean, I assume that they're going to try to close that yield with, and here's the thing, I guess this goes back to the points. I don't want to stick on points, but I assume that some of this yield is going to have to be done with the tokens that they issue. And I assume that if they're going to maintain some of these high yields that they're offering right now, then that's a token that should be highly inflationary, right?
Well, we don't even know if that's high yield. I think that's the whole point. It's kind of like the whole centralized blast chain where people just sent funds randomly to some multi-sig, and then for the promise of points, nobody really knows what the true value is. And then the entire chain is actually based on that whole system of just play around in our protocols and you earn points, and eventually maybe one day we'll have a token that'll distribute. We don't know.
God bless the degens.
But they have to string this along essentially. As long as they need to develop, because you're 100% right. Until there's a working product, there's actual AVSs that are built that are producing yield. They could be at a point where people are just, withdrawing. And I think right now withdrawals are actually not enabled, so you can't even withdraw that out of the protocol yet, right? But at some point, withdrawals will be enabled, and then, will there be a flight of people out of the system if there's no active AVSs or anybody who's producing enough yield, or if there's another opportunity? Or somebody that's doing something similar? I mean, who knows? So how long do you have to string along the point system before, you actually have a working product? And you can't just have a working product. You have to have, I think, the AVS is like lined up and ready to go and ready to produce and do stuff.
Well, and they need custom. So not only do you need the AVSs, but the AVSs need customers.
Yeah.
You need mature AVSs for it to actually work.
I mean, that's possible as long as there's like, they have strong partnerships. I don't think like something that's a complete upstart is going to have that kind of traction, but I mean, we've seen, the optimism roll up now, like essentially ecosystem, the SDK like explosion, right? So now there's like base chain and there's Blast is really a fork with a license change of the Optimism SDK, and then there's a Frax chain, I think, is on the Optimism SDK. So if they do get a community and they do get like people, they might be able to get users. So it depends on how their customer sales side is on that, and if they're going to get the right people to build AVSs, and it's not just like I know that there were some people trying to do some cool things that I met around security and other things. I don't know that they'll have sufficient demand to produce enough yield for $5 billion, but so I think it's it's based on their partnerships that they sort of have in the pipeline as well.
By the way, if anyone from Eigen Layer is watching this, love to have you guys on. If you could answer some of these questions, I'd be so stoked.
I mean, I want to say that I love the idea, though. I mean, like Darren, when he started off, saying like where you're borrowing the validation of the decentralization of the Ethereum network in order to, build or use that right for the AVSs. It's a good idea. It's just like execution wise, there's just a lot that goes into it. So, now that they have such a, I think, sufficient marketing explosion around Eigen Layer, maybe they do get the people that have the demand for creating AVSs and stuff like that.
Well, hey, Darren, I just wanted to say this has been incredibly insightful. I could just feel the Ethereum rocket pool passion just oozing out of you. Tons of knowledge. If you're watching this, I will have the links below so you can learn more about Rocket Pool, about Beefy, and about all of the goodness that is out there in the world of Ethereum. You've been watching the Beefy Pod, and we love having you. Have a great day, and remember, nothing here is financial advice. Just a bunch of people on the internet having fun in the crypto space. Have a great day.